This is Chapter 3, Section 5, Part 2, Cultural Universals. As we go through today's information, I recommend that you take notes for your check for understanding at the end of this lesson, as well as for your test at the end of the chapter. So we've been talking about culture and how culture is taught to new members of a society. And today we're going to talk about the things that different cultures have in common. So cultural universals are general cultural traits that exist in all cultures. So in all cultures, there are different things that they all practice. So it could be sports, cooking, courtship, division of labor, education, healthcare, things like that. And while each of these traits might look different, they all exist. So the example here is people getting married. So in every culture, there is some type of courtship of how somebody finds a partner, and then how they announce kind of to the rest of society that they are a partnership. But it may look different depending on which culture you're visiting or which country you're visiting. And so researchers have identified over 70 different culturally universal traits, and we're going to look at some of those in just a minute. So these are some of those traits. So all cultures have an economy, institutions, arts, language, environment, recreation, and beliefs, and within those things, they also have all of these subsections as well. So they all have trade, tools, technology, goods, services, jobs, business, transportation, communications, food, shelter, clothing, family, government, education, religion, economy, so on and so forth. So in every single culture, every single society, we can see all of these different traits. Do they all look exactly the same? No. We might really enjoy football here in the United States, but they might really enjoy cricket over in Great Britain, both of which are sports, but they're different types of sports. Another example is like shelter. Here in the United States, it's very common for us to have apartments and houses, but in other cultures they might have huts, or they might live in skyscrapers and things like that, that we don't see as much around here. We all have to eat food. Our food may be different. We might like hamburgers and hot dogs here in the United States, but if you go to Italy, you might eat a lot of pasta. If you go to Japan, you might eat a lot of seafood, but we all have this trait in common. So we're going to talk about these a little bit more because we also need to define the fact that while all these traits are universal, like I was saying before, they look different in each culture. So these are called cultural particulars. It's the way in which a culture expresses the universal traits. So like we were saying with the wedding, every culture has some version of courtship where partners announce to society that they are together, but that might look different. So our wedding here in the United States might look different than a wedding in India, might look different than a wedding in China, might look different than a wedding in Mexico. So it just depends on where you go. The other example your textbook gave is like child rearing, so bringing up children and kind of what that looks like. In the United States, historically, it's predominantly fallen on the mother to take the responsibility of most of the child rearing, so bringing up the kids and taking care of them. But if you go to other places around the world, like the Manus of New Guinea, childcare is completely left up to the father. And then there are other cultures as well where it's a complete division of labor, so men and women participate equally in the raising of their children. Now, we definitely could make the argument that there are definitely homes in the United States where fathers are taking care of their children and there is no mother present, or, that there's this shared responsibility between a father and a mother to take care of the children. But if we look at the big picture, which is sociology, I think that there is still this trend of the mother being responsible for most of that child rearing in the U.S. So why do these cultural universals exist? So they look different, but they exist in every culture. And so we need to figure out, well, why is that? How is it that even though we're maybe on opposite sides of the world, speak totally different languages, on the surface things look very different, but we all still have these things in common? A lot of it comes back to biology. So we have a biological similarity among all humans, and this accounts for many of the similarities. So one biological part of us is this drive to survive. And so in order for a society or a culture to survive, you have to have children. The children have to be taken care of. People have to eat. People who get sick, they have to have some form of medical care that could be in the form of going to a hospital and seeing a medical professional, or it could be the local medicine man or whatever the case may be within that culture of who they believe cures the sick or helps the sick. In every society, people die, and there need to be funeral rites, burials. What do they do with the person after they've passed? What is their spiritual connection? How do they explain the death of people and the birth of people in a spiritual way? That's very common among cultures. And then we also need things like clothing and shelter. And so because we have all of these drives to survive, we have to have each of these elements. And so therefore, that's why we see a lot of them in all cultures. So societies all face similar social issues, and new members must be taught culture. And it's not usually something we really think about. We're not day to day thinking, well, this person's here from another country, I need to teach them these ways. Generally, it happens kind of naturally, and especially when we're talking about children. So whenever a child is born into a culture, it's just kind of inherent that you're going to teach them culture, but you may not necessarily be thinking about it. Your children begin to learn culture before they can even talk. And so they're constantly watching their parents, trying to figure out how to respond to different things. They may be looking at gender norms. What is it that society teaches boys versus what society teaches girls? And they absorb that information. And then as they grow older, they start to oftentimes kind of role play the things that they have seen. So you might see like a little girl who carries her baby doll around because she kind of associates that being kind of what girls do. And then you might see a boy pushing around a Tonka truck or something like that, because again, that's how society has taught him that boys should act or what boys should be doing based on societal norms. So, and that's a big topic here in what we're talking about. Now, every society is different. So you may go to a different culture and see girls playing with trucks and boys playing with dolls. It just depends on the culture that you're talking about.